This is the Garmin EPIX Gen 2, and this might just be the best running watch I've ever used. Garmin sent me this watch for review, but this video is not sponsored and I do not get to keep the watch afterwards, which I am gutted about. The bezels and the back cover of the EPIX are made from stainless steel or titanium, depending on which version you get. If you get one of the sapphire editions, you get the titanium. Both have fibre reinforced polymer cases. The watch body is 47mm by 47mm by 14.5mm. And it weighs between 70 and 76 grams depending on the model. It comes in 4 colour options: slate steel, white titanium and black titanium, with either a chestnut leather strap or a black silicone strap. This is the black titanium version with the black silicone strap. All but the slate steel version are sapphire editions, which upgrade some of the features. I personally really like the design of the watch, especially in this black titanium colorway. One thing worth mentioning about the design is the bezel. It's actually quite sharp. I'm not saying you're going to slice your hand open on it, but I have taken a couple of chunks out of the edge of my desk and even a little bit out of my Apple keyboard. The watch strap on the version I have is made of silicone, but there are some models that come with leather. The silicone is a smoother, more matte finish, especially compared to something like this. This is the Forerunner 245 and the silicone on this has a more shiny texture to it. The silicone on the EPIX is also significantly less stretchy than that on the 245. This is neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's just different. Even in the short time I've had to test the EPIX, the silicone strap has begun to show some wear. That matte finish is starting to wear off on the corners of the loops, for instance, and elsewhere on the watch. It is showing some signs of scratching, but that's to be expected when you're wearing something like this every day. The strap buckle matches the colour and material of the bezel, so if you get this black titanium version, you're going to get a black titanium buckle. If you get the silver version, likewise. It features 2 loops, only one of which has a centre post in it to stop it sliding around, and the other one is just free floating in between that and the buckle. I said in my Coros Vertix 2 review, linked up here and down here if you haven't seen it, that the quick release system used for the straps was one of the best I've ever used. Well, the strap quick release on this works exactly the same. So it got me thinking, did Garmin actually come up with these first? Well, it turns out Garmin has been using these on the Fenix 5 since at least 2017, which was released a full 2 years before the original Vertix. So I think praise for this mechanism now belongs to Garmin. Let me know down in the comments if I am still wrong and somebody else came up with it. Either way, they work very well and they're very satisfying to detach and attach. Anyway, all this to say that the EPIX uses the quick fit system of bands that Garmin applied to a bunch of their different watches, which means you can also get a bunch of different colors by going to their website, and as long as you get a 22mm quick fit version, it's going to fit the EPIX. The EPIX is rated to 10 atmospheres or roughly 100 meters, so it's pretty waterproof. The stated battery life for the EPIX is 6 days in full smartwatch mode, and up to 16 days when the display is not always on. In my testing, I've had the screen set to always on, the heart rate tracking set to auto, so it's pretty much taking a reading all throughout the day and night, and the pulse oximeter set to all day. I've also been wearing the EPIX during sleep with sleep tracking turned on. Basically, I've had everything set to max. This mixed with activity tracking and music playback, I've seen around 4 days between charges on average. This is pretty impressive when you consider everything that it's doing, including running a full AMOLED display. But more on that later. In comparison to my 245 Music, which I know it's older, I've had it for a couple of years now, and the battery's smaller, forget all that, the EPIX was far more power efficient. On this 10K run, for instance, I wore both watches. The run took around 45 minutes, and in that time, the 245 used about 13% battery. This was with GPS all systems on, heart rate tracking, and pulse oximeter tracking. In comparison, the EPIX only used 7% on the same run. I had all the same features turned on, but the difference with this one is that I actually was also streaming music from the watch to my AirPods. Maximum battery life of the EPIX is said to be around 21 days in battery saver mode, which will of course limit the functionality. It does things like disables the phone connection, the heart rate monitor and other sensors will stop tracking, sleep tracking is not recorded, and honestly, I haven't tested this. I don't need my watch to go that long, and if you're not using any of the features, really, what's the point? You'll get up to around 75 hours using GPS in the extended mode, or up to 14 days in expedition mode. Otherwise, it's 30 hours with GPS only, and I haven't tested that either. Basically, there are a bunch of varying battery life predictions depending on what features you have turned on and off. In fact, the EPIX has something called power modes. These are preset battery modes which you can switch between to get the best battery life for the features that you want enabled. Each battery mode shows which features are turned on and off and gives you a predicted battery life for the remaining battery that you're currently on. You can edit any of these existing power modes if you really desperately want to keep a feature turned on that is by default turned off. And you can even create a custom power mode if you know exactly what you want on and off and call it whatever you like, and that's the one that you go to. All in all, when it comes to battery life, you can really tailor exactly how long you want to get out of your battery with sort of balancing the features that you're going to use versus the battery life that you want to get. Power saver mode is by default set to kick in at 24 hours remaining. But again, you can customize this to be longer or shorter depending on your preference. The EPIX is also pretty clever. It knows when it's not on your wrist, and if it isn't, it's going to turn off the always on display and it's going to stop using the sensors for tracking. So it's going to preserve your battery life as long as possible when not on your wrist. Speaking of sensors, the EPIX has a bunch of them. It has a heart rate monitor, a barometric altimeter, a compass, a gyroscope, an accelerometer, a thermometer, an ambient light sensor, and a blood oxygen sensor. The EPIX has everything you would expect at this price point. It's got Bluetooth, it's got Ant Plus, and it's got Wi-Fi. Speaking of Wi-Fi, it's worth noting that the EPIX only supports 2.4 GHz. This means that if your Wi-Fi router is 5 GHz or it switches between 5 and 2.4, then you may have trouble connecting. This is something that's plagued my experience with the 245 when it comes to updating music. If you want to see the review on that watch, I will link it up here and down here. I still get issues even if I force my router to go into 2.4 GHz. The only workaround I've found for that watch is to pair it with my iPhone using a hotspot and do the downloads from there. I am pleased to tell you, however, that on the EPIX I have had no such issues. It connects fine for both updates and for updating the music, downloading new playlists, all of that works fine. I've had literally no issues, and it's actually pretty fast. More on the music feature later. The screen on this thing is amazing. In fact, it's kind of spoiled all of the other Garmin watches I've used up to this point. I've had this Phoenix 7 at the same time as testing the EPIX, and to be honest, whenever I'm wearing this, I just wish I was wearing this. I'll leave a link up here and down here to the review of that watch, but spoiler alert, there are a lot of similarities. The screen is a 1.3 inch 416 by 416 pixel AMOLED touchscreen display. It's covered in Gorilla Glass DX, or if, like this watch, you have a Sapphire edition, it's covered in Sapphire Crystal. The screen is clear and bright even in direct sunlight. In fact, when compared to the Phoenix 7 in its full brightness mode and the EPIX in its lowest brightness mode, there are in fact 3, it is significantly brighter. If you've watched some of my reviews before, you'll know that I'm not particularly a fan of touchscreens on running watches. I find them difficult to operate when you've got sweaty fingers, you have to look at them in order to interact with them, and you can forget about using them in the winter with gloves. It's just a real pain. The EPIX completely changes that. I still think all those things are true, they just don't apply to this watch. Let me explain. The EPIX has Garmin's familiar 5-button layout, which comes with all the benefits of having a physical interface. I can start and stop my run without looking at the screen, I can scroll through data pages with sweaty fingers, and I can skip that annoying track with just 2 button presses. It just works. And that's because you can operate the watch almost entirely without the touchscreen. In fact, you can turn it off altogether if you want. And by default, that's exactly what happens when you start an activity. The touchscreen gets disabled and you just use the buttons until the activity ends. Then when you finish the activity, then the touchscreen function returns. It works totally seamlessly. If you decide you do want to use the touchscreen during an activity, then you've got the option to turn it back on. You can do this in the activity when you start it by going to the settings menu in that activity. This means that you can have it on or off depending on what activity you're doing. You might want it for one and not for another. Or you can go into the system settings and change it for everything and have it on for all of the activities. This is the way that all sports watches with touchscreens should work, in my opinion. You get the best of both worlds. You get the convenience of a touchscreen for day-to-day tasks. Scrolling through long lists of activities, which on this watch is very long, is pretty tedious using the up and down buttons. But flicking through them with a touchscreen is an absolute breeze. And you get the reliability of physical controls when you're actually doing an activity. It's not all perfect, of course, and I do find the map controls a little bit fiddly. There's no pinch to zoom, for instance, and there's no way to move around the screen using the buttons, as far as I can tell. So when you're using maps, you're going to end up using a combination of the touchscreen and the buttons. Now, admittedly, fiddly map controls tends to be the norm, regardless of brand, certainly on the ones that I've tried. So the combination of touchscreen and physical buttons makes sense. There are a handful of other examples where one control scheme is not enough. If you were planning to use only the touchscreen, for instance, then again you would fall short. One example being the countdown timer. You can set the time, you can confirm the time, but you can't actually start the timer using the touchscreen. That's always a physical button. You also can't access the submenu for the timer with the touchscreen either. If you're coming from an older, non-touchscreen Garmin device, then the physical controls are going to be really familiar to you. And then the touchscreen is just going to be an added benefit. If, however, you're coming from something like an Apple Watch, then you may be a little bit confused by the odd non-touch enabled quirk. But personally, I haven't used an Apple Watch for any length of time, so I don't know if it's the same on that or not. The buttons themselves are much clickier than the mushy ones on the 245, which is greatly appreciated. However, I do still find them slightly inconsistent. All of the buttons on the EPIX can be used as hotkeys, with the light and the up button set permanently to the quick access shortcuts menu and the main menu, respectively. The quick access menu gives you shortcuts for up to 29 functions. You can display up to 12 on the screen without the need to scroll, or if you want to go mad and add them all, you can, but you're only going to get 11 on screen at once and it will just continue to scroll. Adding or removing shortcuts is easy. You can do this either using the screen by holding down and then you will access the add and remove menu, or you can use the buttons in the same way. You can also choose in which order they appear. In addition to the 2 default hotkeys, you can also configure up to 7 more hotkeys for custom functions. That's the down button, the start button, and the back button. And then the others come from a combination of buttons. There are also 29 custom functions that you can add to these hotkeys, but the list is slightly different to those on the quick access shortcuts, although there is a little bit of crossover. Glances can be accessed by swiping up or down on the touchscreen or using the up and down buttons. Going up, however you do it, will take you to the top of the list, and no prizes for guessing going down will take you to the bottom of the list, which is also where you'll find the edit button, but more on that in a minute. If you were to add everything you could to the list of glances, you would have 33 items on your list, or up to 37 items depending on some additional connected devices, like the Viber camera and the Zero laser device. So what exactly are they? Each glance will give you a snapshot of quick information. Then when you select them, you get a little more detail. Glances are not new to the EPIX, but they may be new to you because they've only been featured in some more recent higher end watches. Think of them as cut down widgets. Where widgets can only display on one page at a time, you can see up to 3 glances on a page at any one time. The order on the list is customizable as well as what you actually want to see. Just hit the edit button and you can move them up or down or remove them altogether. If you want to know more about glances and the widgets that sit behind them, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you hit that notification bell, because I'll be doing a full walkthrough of all the glances in a future video. The sheer number of activities that this watch has is just mind-boggling. If any review of this watch says it's a complete review, then they're lying. There's just way too much to go through everything. I mean, I haven't even been able to test all of the running modes on it yet. In case you're wondering, there are 7. The total activity list by my count stretches to 59. So that's 7 running, 10 cycling, 2 swimming, 2 climbing, 6 skiing, 4 waterboard, 2 paddle sports, 2 golf, 3 racket sports, as well as a bunch of cardio, strength and other miscellaneous activities. Plus there's some additional GPS activity apps like Expedition, where you can track a multi-day activity. Still no badminton though. But let's not forget, you can still create your own custom activity by copying one of the existing ones and changing some of the settings. I've got a whole video on how to do this. I'll link it up here and down here. That was done on the 245, but it works exactly the same on the EPIX. In fact, I'm pretty sure it works the same on all of the Garmin watches. When it comes to running, I clocked up about 65k's on the EPIX, and I can tell you it performed pretty well for me. When you select a run from the activities list, after a few times, you'll get a suggested distance and pace, plus the estimated benefit and why they've suggested it. You can either accept it with the start stop button and then go to do workout. There's also options in here to choose your focus and disable prompts, or you can enter the normal running start screen by pressing the back button. Once you're on the start screen, you can further tailor your run using the activities option menu. You do this by pressing up. This is where you would turn back on the touchscreen if you so wish. In the run settings, you can edit the data screens, you can set alerts, you can choose the power mode, you can turn on or off the metronome, you can configure the map settings, adjust your routing options, change auto lap settings, turn on and off auto pause, climb pro, and auto climb features. There are also toggles for 3D speed and distance, and an option to turn on and off the lap key, the auto scroll feature, segment alerts, and whether or not to broadcast your heart rate. You'll also find the satellite options here with 6 different options. Everything from all systems off to all systems on plus multiband, which is said to be the most accurate. Or if battery life is a concern, then you could opt to turn on ultra track mode, which will save you a bit of battery. Talking of power, you can also set the power save timeout. This can be either normal or extended. And finally, you can also change the accent color. There are 9 to choose from, rename the activity, or forget everything you've just changed and just restore it to the default. Next up is power mode. Here you will get a list of power options. Each one will give you the remaining runtime based on the current battery percentage. Obviously, with all the available activities on the EPIX, I'm not going to go through every one like I just did with running, but there are a couple of others that are worth pointing out, like animated workouts. The EPIX can guide you through preloaded workouts for cardio, strength, yoga and Pilates, with more available to download via Garmin Connect. Each exercise in the workout is accompanied by an animation showing you how to complete the exercise, and you can actually preview these before you start the workout so you know what you're getting yourself into. Are you a keen golfer? Well, the EPIX has you covered. In fact, it's got over 42,000 courses worldwide preloaded onto the EPIX, where you can see in full color, hole by hole, course maps. You can also measure your shots and you can even keep score. If all these activities are not enough for you, then you can always search the Connect IQ store for a few more, where I did in fact find an activity for badminton. Alternatively, you might not know, but you can actually delete them. So if you're intending to only ever use it to run, you could in fact delete all of the other activities and just leave running on the watch. GPS tracking from my testing has been very accurate on the EPIX. In fact, compared to my 245, which I used as the control, it followed the route a little closer. I was actually unable to find any examples on any of my runs of wayward lines from the EPIX. Bear in mind, however, that these have been conducted basically on the same 10 to 15k route, and it is fairly open. I don't run in a city with, high-rise buildings, so GPS signal should be fairly accessible. GPS lock-on time for the EPIX is rapid, at least in my experience. And if you put it in a head-to-head with my 245, there is just no contest. Customization on the EPIX is almost endless. Let me give you an example. Let's take the basic run activity. You can customize the data on screen to show from 1 metric per page to up to 8 metrics per page over 10 pages across 17 categories from up to 165 different data points. This means that on just that one activity, you could be monitoring 80 different metrics across 10 pages at any one time. And that's not everything, because in addition to those 10 custom data pages, there are an additional 10 pages of data, controls, and map functions that you can also add. If you're wondering what exactly are those metrics I can track, then let me tell you. There are 7 timer fields, 3 distance fields, 5 pace fields, 7 speed fields, 20 heart rate fields, 6 stamina fields, 23 run dynamics, 5 cadence fields, 8 pace pro fields, 3 temperature fields, 18 elevation fields, 4 compass fields, 19 navigation fields, 2 muscle oxygen fields, 17 other fields, 13 graphical, and 5 chart fields. If you need any more information than that, then you probably need to run alongside a data analyst in order to give you that information. Obviously, this doesn't just apply to running, and you can have different layouts for different activities. You can also choose which activities are on your favorites list and in what position. Of course, it's not just the activity screen that you can customize. As I mentioned previously, you can customize the shortcuts menu and you can customize the glances. Finally, you can also customize the watch face, where you can choose from 14 preloaded faces, or you can go onto the Connect IQ store and download literally thousands more. Once you've picked the face you like, you can then customize which metrics you see on the face and in what position they appear. Some of the watch faces show more metrics than others, like this one, which shows up to 9 if you include the time. You can also choose the accent color and the data color and turn on or off the seconds. Incidentally, you can only change the appearance of the watch face if the watch is not in sleep mode. The EPIX has all the usual features which you might expect. You can receive notifications for email, text, phone calls, pretty much whatever you receive notifications for on your phone, but you still can't reply to them. You can also accept and decline phone calls, but again, there's no microphone on this watch, so you're not going to be able to take the call on the watch. You can just accept or decline. This is essentially the same as it's been on most Garmin watches. The 245 works exactly the same, which, to be honest, is fine by me. Garmin Pay is present in the EPIX, but beware, support for your particular bank may not be, which is the case for me. A full list of supported banks is available in the app, so you won't get too far down the road of trying to set it up before realizing that actually you're not supported. The EPIX, as you might expect for one of the higher end watches, supports music. You can use Spotify, Amazon Music, Deezer, or you can straight up load MP3s onto the watch if you connect it to a computer. If you have used a music enabled Garmin watch before, then this will be very familiar to you. Controls are very simple and work both with the physical controls and with the touchscreen, although they are a little bit small for touch input. The EPIX starts with 16 gigabytes of internal storage on the lower end model and up to 32 gigabytes of storage on the Sapphire edition. The EPIX also allows you to control the music from your phone. So if you already run with your phone, then you might not feel the need to actually put the music onto the watch, which you will need premium accounts for because you need to actually download the tracks onto the watch. In fact, the music control feature will allow you to control whatever's playing on your phone. So YouTube, podcasts, music, whatever. The EPIX is absolutely packed with features. I mean, it's literally packed with too many features for me to even test them all. I'm serious. I don't know how long this video is going to be as I shoot this, but my mind is literally melting out of my ears thinking about all of the features and trying to cover as many as possible in this video. So if you're still watching, thank you, and I'm impressed. The EPIX is probably overkill for most users. And with a price tag starting at just under £800 in the UK and $900 in the US, it's not exactly an impulse buy. The combination of physical buttons and touchscreen sets the standard for me and has completely changed my opinion on touchscreens in running watches. The implementation is exactly how it should be. The touchscreen doesn't hinder the use of the watch in any way, it just elevates the experience. The screen is definitely the standout feature for me, and it also happens to be built on basically their most feature-packed watch. The EPIX is basically the Phoenix 7, but with a much better screen. I absolutely love the EPIX, and I'm a little sad that I have to send it back. If you want to know more about a specific feature on the EPIX, then just let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.